Okay, welcome everyone. This is our May Public Health and Safety meeting. And Cindy Ricketts is with us on Zoom. So we have everyone we're expecting. And we're going to start just by approving the minutes from April. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from April.
Okay, Cindy?
Second?
Okay, so we'll approve the minutes?
Yep.
Okay. So next we go to public comment. And we have some folks here with us in the room, so we'll start. We'll start in the front row and make our way through. If you could just give us your name and address. Okay, Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly Burke, and I live at 215 Iona. I think this is about my 7th or 8th meeting in a row, and I'm happy to be here because the traffic engineer did submit his report, and I woke up really excited about his recommendations. There were 3 in particular. One was turn restrictions, the second was speed humps, and the third was intersection improvements. And I hope very much that we can take all 3 of them. And if there's any hesitation on any of them, I'm still hoping that we can take all 3 and then revisit the topic because it's of such great concern to our neighborhood. The other thing I just want to say is I know that there are a number of people who live in Narberth who have concerns about public safety. And I think that we would be potentially the first street that I know of that would get speed humps and other such modifications. And I think that it would be a great precedent for our borough and for our people who live in Narberth to see that change is happening, it's possible. It's really important that we initiate change. And so I'm hoping this can be a first step toward that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you.
Yeah, my name's John Kistler. I'm at 211 Iona, so I'm Molly's neighbor, and I'm here for the same topic. I was heartened to read this report as well. My history with this conversation goes back to 2007. I have a letter in my house from Bill Martin from 2007, said he's going to put a traffic engineer on it, and it's just kind of waned. So again, I'm here to really see if we can move forward, as Molly said. We met with the traffic engineer, and if you read this report, the volume is incredible. Even the traffic engineer was shocked at how much volume is going down our street. So, you know, we do have an issue, and I really hope that we start to address that issue. The one other comment I'd make that's in this report is they're recommending no turns in the morning and in the afternoon. But if you look at the stats, between those 2 time frames is actually when the highest volume of traffic goes through. So maybe we can revisit the window of that no left turn, because we're actually missing the window where the most traffic goes in front of our houses. Okay? Thank you.
Sure. Hi, it's Dave Bordeaux, 104 Chestnut Avenue. My comments, I would just like to know when we're going to start implementing a lot of the traffic concerns that have come up. You know, when I go back and I look at the notes, I go back to like 2021 of the agenda. I look at traffic concerns at the bottom for October of 2021, November of 2021, December 2021, January 2022, and then it seems to just kind of go away as if there weren't traffic concerns. I brought up during a meeting in December of 2021 issue on Wynwood and Chestnut Avenue, and the police chief at the time, I think, acknowledged the concern that I had, and I had never heard anything back. Not to parrot what you've probably heard from me mentioned in the past, but I've had 3 hit and runs. I've almost watched my son get creamed by a car. Last Saturday, when I drove down Wynwood, made a left on to Windsor from Wynwood around 11:30 Saturday morning, I was behind a car and I watched the car as I'm driving go through every single stop sign everyone, I mean, not even putting on brakes, just going through slowly. I mean, it wasn't going 30 or 35 miles an hour. It was every single stop sign. And then I turned off on Forest Avenue to pick up my dry cleaning. But just completely ignored every stop sign. I walked to the office, my office, almost every single day. And I see it all the time. You know, walking towards the train station, just cars just going right through the stop signs. And I'm not sure why we're not enforcing the stop sign rules. But I'm confused as to why I see it on the agenda, the traffic concerns for years, but it doesn't seem like anything's happening to enforce these rules that we have in place.
Okay,
So I'd like to know when we're going to start enforcing the rules, because I don't want to watch what I saw a few years ago with my son out here.
yeah, thank you, David, I appreciate that.
Well, it's like, yeah, and thank you, but I would at least like to know when.
Yeah,
It's going
we'll address that in the meeting. Yeah, thank you. Okay, other comments in the next row?
No, I'm Jean Lamb. I'm at 24 Narbrook Park. So I first want to say I support the residents of Iona and what they've been able to accomplish. And my primary issue is the perennial issue of the stop sign that's, you know, across from Narbrook Park there at the corner of Windsor and Narbrook Park. That's been an issue forever at my son's school bus stop. We stand there every day. I know you know, most of the cars do a roll and stop at best. Many just completely breeze through. It's, as you know, a major area where children tend to cross in order to access the park. I think the stop signs couldn't be any larger at this point, so I don't think that that's going to solve it, but it's been a long time issue, and I think the borough has a responsibility to ensure safe crossing, especially for areas where children are present across from a park. And I'd like to know what we could do in order to get someone to actually study the issue and make recommendations. I'm aware that there's such a thing as, just like there are red light cameras, there are stop sign cameras. That's a thing apparently, and you can put one in and maybe it would be a source of revenue for the borough because I know no one stops there. But you know, whatever we could do to kind of advance that, because I know we've spoken about it before. People say, okay, let's step up enforcement. The cops kindly come maybe for while the cop car is there, people stop, and then as soon as the cop car is gone, that's the end of it, and people go right back to going through that. And we have a neighbor whose daughter was nearly hit there not that long ago.
I've nearly been hit there. I live directly in front of that stop sign at 2 Narbrook Park. My name is Kelly McLaughlin, or Kelly Kumar, sorry. And we watch it all day long. It's hard to enjoy the yard sometimes because I'm so scared that my kids are gonna see someone get hit or my kids are gonna get hit. We've been nearly hit while crossing the children with multiple adults. People have almost driven into us and then said, whoops, sorry. Like they don't even react as if what they've just done could have potentially hurt someone. So I just don't think, I think the size of it, the stop sign makes people look at it as a show.
Okay, thank you. We'll keep going.
Yeah, hi, my name is Mary Joseph. I'm at 211 Iona, and I just hear about the traffic report. I agree with what John and Molly have said. I'm excited to see it. I will say, just walking up here today to come to this meeting, we we saw someone blow through the light using Iona as a cut through, so I'm excited that there are some good options on the table for us to take a look at to make our streets safer.
Good, thank you.
I don't know what's being proposed, so I don't.
Oh, this is just a public comment period, if you'd like to make a public comment. Or you can pass.
Okay,
Okay, we'll go to the back row.
Hi, Chris Domlin. I've lived on Iona Avenue at 2 residences since 2012, so 310 Iona, and then just as of the last month, 206 Iona. So I'm right across the street from Molly. I've, in that time, I've seen it all on Iona, especially the 300 block where you have parking on both sides of the street, you have two-way traffic, you have residences alongside businesses, which I think also present a really kind of interesting dynamic. I think, I didn't really prepare any remarks for this morning, but I would just say that I think something definitely has to change with the traffic in East Monroe. It's a great community, it's a great town, and I just think that it's a detriment at this point. So.
Okay,
I'll
thank
stop
you.
there.
Okay, I think,
Jay Whitmore, I'm at 121 Windsor, trying to keep it tight, a little list. First off, just want to thank Fred for sharing concerns last month, regarding response times for the fire department. Just wanted to raise a few points in response. So the first one is that the stop signs that potentially are going in up along Windsor might actually decrease congestion. I think that's the goal over time. As regular morning commuters, the afternoon commuters potentially take an alternate route and don't just blast through our town. Second point would be that pedestrian safety, in my opinion, needs to be balanced against fire safety. I mean, I guess this is all under the umbrella of public safety. But I think ultimately, the overall borough attractiveness, current state is we're choosing vehicles over pedestrians, and I, as a resident, don't really want that to continue if possible. And then finally, the current traffic patterns, based on the data that we've reviewed to date, I don't think that volume is heavy enough on Windsor to lead to problems responding. I'm not an expert, but I would say that even if these stop signs do lead to more congestion over time, there are subsequent fixes that we can consider, right? So maybe modified parking, moving it over to one side of the street instead of two, and then potentially different traffic patterns, right? Making the stretch between Conway and Dudley one-way stretch as opposed to two-way traffic with cars playing chicken with each other going both ways. So that's it.
okay, thank you.
Thanks.
John Constantine, 400 Harvard. Just want to make a comment about the baseball field. I know the netting has already been discussed and put on hold, but just because an insurance company says you're not going to be held liable doesn't make it right not to do something when you know that there is a hazard there. I mean, there are kids that can hit the baseball over that fence. And to put it on for 6 months just for budgetary concerns doesn't seem right. I mean, you can find a way to, 6 months time or, to get that to work. To get it started now instead of, waiting for an accident to happen. And then the other thing is, I know you discussed body cameras last month. Just wanted to get an update. I know it's not quite 30 days, but how that's going, because it is important for the events to be captured as they happen. So
Okay.
there's a need for misguidance when things are reported.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Okay. All right, thank you all for coming. Yes, oh. Go ahead.
My name is Tara Tremper. I live at 115 Iona, right at the T of Windsor in Iona. So years ago, they put in the no left signs, and I guess it worked, I'm not really sure, but I have almost an aerial view of what a nightmare that can be, especially coming from people at Meeting House stop sign. They're coming down Iona, heading towards Haverford. You see them blow through Iona. Just looking at the Haverford sign. It's a visual thing. It's not that for bad people, but that is a problem. Also, when you have the signs up, they put in a really big sign, about 6 feet, right in my yard. So when I look out my front window, I just saw this big sheet of metal. I really hope they don't do that again. It was removed a few years later. So, and as far as the screen going around the curves of Iona and Windsor, does that affect like the fire hydrant and the 44 bus stop? Or, I'm not really sure what that's for.
Okay, yeah, we'll be discussing that with the traffic engineer
Okay.
in this meeting.
Oh, and I was also told back in the day when they had the signs, I said, people seem to be ignoring this, do not turn left. And why don't you enforce the law? We said we can't, it's not an PennDOT sign. which I don't know if that's true or not, but.
All right, so thank you all for your comments. Are there any folks on Zoom?
Yeah, if anyone on Zoom wants to provide any public comment, just physically raise your hand or use the use hand function. Anybody in here?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Gaber. I live at 225 Iona. I just wanted to chime in support of the recommendations for the traffic report. I live between Meeting House Lane and Windsor, and very many times have witnessed children or pets or people almost get hit. So,
Okay, thank you.
thanks.
Good morning, Marjorie Cases, 219 Iona, and I am in support of the traffic report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Marika Beneventi from 212 Iona, and I'm also here in support of controlling the traffic on Iona Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Lauren Wilson at 202 Iona Avenue. I'm calling in reference to the traffic report as well. I have witnessed so many travesties between the trucks coming down the street, the new residents who live here zooming down the street. Kids can barely play anymore. Something has to be done, and I'm with that. Whatever we want to do, speed bumps, lights, something needs to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, I'm Karen Kirshner. I live at 221 Iona. I'm here to support the rest of Iona Avenue for the traffic report. I read through it this morning and this looks very positive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else? Good, I think we're good.
Okay. All right, thank you all. I think this is our most well-attended meeting that in maybe 5 years, in the committee. So appreciate you all coming out. Traffic concerns are the biggest concern of this committee, and it's just, we have no other concern that we hear as much about. So it's a challenge for us. We have, certain challenges of scale. So the borough being as small as it is, we have a small force. We can't be at every stop sign, so what we've been moving towards is infrastructure. And that's what we're discussing with the engineer. We're looking for structural changes. We are also required to build 19 bump outs for stormwater bump outs. And so we're looking to, that's a requirement that comes to us from the state. So we are hoping to combine our need to build these 19 bump outs with traffic calming infrastructure. So that's kind of the direction that we're hoping to go in, but it does take money, and it takes engineering and planning. So it's a slower process, but we're getting going, at least with Iona. So, okay, why don't we go into, so this is 3.1, 3.2, 3.3 on the agenda, and we have our traffic engineer with us, is that right?
Yeah, Mike, can you hear us?
I'm here. Am I coming through?
Yes.
All right, great.
Okay. All right. Welcome, Mike, and thank you for the report that you sent us.
Sure.
So, the committee has had a chance to look at it, and we've sent some questions your way. So, do you want to start us off, Mike, by offering just kind of a brief overview?
Yeah, I think that'd be best if I just go through a quick review of my report, although Molly, I think, hit most of it when she had her public comment. But we looked at some previous studies that were done along Iona for traffic calming. they were more a little bit of a larger scale than just looking at Iona specifically, but they had some good data in there that we looked at. We did some traffic counts of our own, and Public Works, the Borough Public Works was out and did a speed study. They gave us some traffic count volume as well. So when we looked at all that, we also had a meeting in the field with the residents just to get some up close and personal concerns, to really hear from the folks that live along there and to stand there and sort of witness the traffic going up and down Iona. And I think it's no mystery that we have a bit of a cut-through problem in that section of the borough. And right now, with the bridge out, it's lighter than it will be in the future. I think it's gonna increase when the bridge is put back in place. But one of the biggest things we saw was that the 200 block between Meeting House and Windsor was taking a pretty good brunt of that cut-through traffic as cars were coming up Iona and turning right on Meeting House. So we counted that intersection at Meeting House and Iona and really saw how much traffic was ditching off of Iona at that point. It was a lot. So that one block really does get a good brunt of it. There's cut-through traffic up and down Iona, and some of those other areas will have to be looked at some point, but I think addressing this sort of initial concern may help some of those other sections of Iona, just in the general reduction in cut-through traffic. So hopefully improvements, if they go into place that were recommended as part of this report, would help at not just the 200 block, but also the 300 block of Iona. And what the recommended improvements are, it's threefold. They were mentioned earlier, is there was a previous left turn restriction at Iona and Windsor. So drivers coming eastbound on Windsor could not turn left onto Iona I think it was only in the AM period from 7 to 9. When we looked at the counts, it's also higher in the PM peak. And I think a resident commented before, even during the middle of the day, it's very high as well, which it is sort of a constant issue. So we recommended expanding that left turn restriction, putting it back in, expanding it to the AM and PM peaks, and it can always be expanded further. Understanding that there was an enforcement issue, and a turn restriction is an enforcement-based traffic calming element, I'll say, and it was alluded to already. Enforcement-based traffic calming is tough because you have to enforce it. Unless someone's out there all the time, people are going to ignore signage like that at times. The other recommendations that I'll get into that we're making are more physical. They're non-enforcement based, and they're meant to slow traffic without the need to have your police department chasing people down all day trying to calm traffic. So that's sort of the three types: is one, signage, and two are physical. So with the turn restriction going back into place, that's a recommendation that we have to see if it works. What I'd recommend is that we look at some count data before and after, and see if we think it's working, that turn restriction, and also see if it's impacting any other adjacent roadways. You restrict a turn at one point, or they're just going to head down the previous block and cause an issue over there. So I think doing some counts and seeing what that turn restriction really does is important. And I think with all of these elements that we're proposing, anytime we put in traffic calming, we like to do before and after studies just to look at effectiveness. It helps not only guide us on that specific project, but in future projects, what works and what doesn't work. So I think any of these we'd want to look at before and afters. So the turn restriction, we recommended going back in and expanding to the PM peak. Next, we had just scroll down a little bit. I have it online too. That's good. I didn't know if anyone else was reading along, but a speed hump. So we talked about a speed hump with the residents, and speed humps do two things. One is they control speeding, and two, they do help reduce cut-through traffic because folks tend to go in areas where there aren't speed humps and avoid areas that have a lot of speed humps. Here, we can only fit one in. PennDOT requirements are that you can't have a speed hump located within 150 feet of an unsignalized intersection. So since a 200 block isn't that long, there's really only room for one speed hump at this location. A speed hump is not a requirement, and we don't have a major speeding issue. I know that some residents would disagree with that, but based on the data, we were having most folks traveling at or below the posted speed limit. That said, 25 miles an hour on a small street with parking on both sides and kids outside seems fast when you're standing there. It really does. So I think a speed hump here would be a nice addition to slow people down between this block as they're cutting through. Cut-through traffic tends to travel a little bit faster than other traffic. Also, like I mentioned, speed humps can deter some cut-through traffic, so it might actually help reduce it. But, not an absolute requirement. And any of these three improvements I've recommended can be put in on their own and have some benefit, or they can be put in together, So there's no improvement that's dependent on the other with the three recommended improvements. So a speed hump is viable on that section. There is a location where it can go. I know parking has been a concern, However, these speed humps are between 3 and 4 inches high, and where I put them on residential streets in the past, people can park on them. We don't put up no parking signs unless it's offset and there's a median with the speed hump, and you really can't park where it would pinch things down. So, they're 12 feet long. Even if you didn't park on it and parked right up against it, it wouldn't take out a full parking space. But like I said, most people park right on it and along it, so it hasn't reduced parking in my experience. Next, the third improvement was 2 intersection bump out improvements. As was mentioned, we need to do a lot of bump outs in the borough anyway for stormwater management. And anywhere you can put a bump out in that's going to calm traffic and reduce pedestrian crossings, that's just a win. It's a win-win because we're meeting our stormwater requirements and slowing traffic. This will slow traffic turning onto Iona from Windsor for the hours that it's not restricted. It also actually slows traffic just along Iona. So people coming north on Iona, they're stopped at the stop sign, but the intersection's tighter with these bump outs. So you got to take a second. You can't just fly through, and you got to look at it a little bit. It also, like I said, reduces the pedestrian crossing distance. So the peds are out in the roadway a little bit before they cross. There was a question about utilities and I think a fire hydrant. So just to explain the bump outs, if you think of a corner of the intersection, the existing sidewalk stays right where it is. We take the curb and move it out into the intersection, and then the area that used to be roadway is filled with landscaping of some kind. Here's some stormwater management, and then we'd have a little sidewalk path to a ramp to connect the pedestrians out to the end of the bump out. So usually we can work very well with existing utilities with these bump outs. We may have to raise a manhole or other utility, but for the most part, everything would stay where it was. So the fire hydrant in that location, we wouldn't mess that. We leave the fire hydrant where it is and just work around the utilities for the most part. We proposed that both at Iona and Windsor, and then Iona and Meeting House as well, where we had the major turn movements and most of the cut-through traffic turning based on our study. And that'll hopefully slow those turning movements and make it easier for the pedestrians to cross there. And it's actually just a nice overall improvement. Get some green space in there, some more green space up against the roadway. So there's an aesthetic advantage to the bump outs as well. So those are our recommendations at this point, the 3 recommended improvements for this area. And like I said, again, any one of these would be an improvement in my opinion. All 3 together would be a better improvement. But as you want to go through, the signage can obviously be done very quickly for very little money. The speed hump can be done quickly as well. That's about $10,000 to put in a speed hump. The bump outs need design. So they would have to be designed, and they would be more expensive since we have to put some stormwater management controls in them. It's not just grass, a bump out with grass, which is a whole lot easier. When we have to design the bump outs, look at the utility conflicts, put together a contract, that's a little bit of a longer lead time improvement, and it's certainly going to be more expensive. But since it's doing that dual need of stormwater and traffic calming, I think it's money well spent. So those are the proposed improvements, and happy to answer questions on those and chat about them further.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So why don't we go to the committee and see what questions we have for the engineer. I know one question was raised about fire equipment turning, and maybe also the 44 bus. Do you foresee any problems, Mike, with the bump outs?
Yeah, with the bump outs, one of the first things we have to do is run turning templates for emergency vehicles and school buses and whatever the largest vehicle we think is going to come in there. So the actual width of the bump outs and where they end up could change based on those turning templates. Luckily, we don't have double-sided bump outs here, so these aren't 4-way intersections. So we have room on the I'll call it the T side of the intersections where we're not putting bump outs. We could hopefully not restrict any additional parking because parking is already restricted at the intersections. So we'll run turning templates as part of our design for both the buses and emergency vehicles to make sure they can make the turns. And that, like I said, ultimately decides the final alignment of the bump outs.
Okay, thanks. Jean?
Yeah, so Mike, I had put forward some questions about the exact design of those bump outs.
Yeah.
I was curious about the height, the curb height of them, and if the fire trucks and the bus would be able to kind of go over those curbs, or if it's restrictive, if the height is restrictive so that they would not be able to go over those curbs.
Yeah, these would not be designed to accommodate trucks and emergency vehicles on top of them. These would be upright curbing that's typically the same curb height as what's there today on the corner. It's just moved out further. So it would be a typical barrier curb, not a mountable curb, which is why when we run those turning templates, we have to make sure we place them so that the emergency vehicles can still make the turn, because they won't be, they'd be driving over a curb essentially. It's a barrier curb that we move out. And the exact height, it's usually anywhere from 4 to 6 inches probably in this area, depending on how many times we've paved this road and what kind of curb reveal we have left out there. Sometimes you don't have a lot of curb reveal, but we'd match whatever reveal is out there and put in sort of a standard height curb, I call it.
Okay, Cindy?
Thanks. I just wanted to start to make a quick comment. One of the residents has said we could ticket for revenue. And as much as I would absolutely love that, particularly as the chair of FNA, I do want to highlight that that is illegal to ticket for revenue. So any increase in ticketing is happening for traffic and not revenue generating. I do think Iona is a good pilot for the community, and particularly the dual use of our stormwater bump outs that are required by us via a state mandate. I do, Mike, want to again underscore that once that bridge opens, our volume will exponentially increase. I could go back and pull those data from original study counts, but I can tell you anecdotally, it is radically less since the closure of that bridge. So cutout volume is incredibly important. The left-hand sign did nothing. I'm happy to hear you say we'll do pre and post. I mean, if a police officer was sitting there, someone would change their pattern. But we did that years ago and really concluded that without a light at Meeting House in Haverford, it really was the only option. So I appreciate you collecting those data. Given the parking restrictions on Iona, I guess kind of 3 questions are: 1, did you consider raised pedestrian crosswalks? Did you evaluate the rubber speed humps, which allow, I'm glad to hear that you could park on them. The city of Philadelphia has used these raised staggered pedestrian rubber humps. That feels a little bit more modern than kind of the traditional speed hump. And I guess the last is really more of a comment / question is, while I appreciate the 200 block of Iona being a pilot, we really cannot ignore Meeting House, which is one of the largest strips where there is no signal to stop, and speed is in fact an issue. And the 300 block of Iona, I mean, we don't even need the data to highlight all the issues there. And how can we use the 200 block with the stated goal and plan to evaluate the issues down to Montgomery Avenue?
There were multiple questions there, Cindy. I'm going to work backwards.
Okay, sorry. Raised pedestrian crosswalks, staggered rubber speed humps, and how do we incorporate Meeting House 300 block?
Okay, so
thanks, Mike.
Raised pedestrian crosswalks. So here, where we have pedestrian crossings, it's basically at the intersection. So it wouldn't necessarily be a single raised crosswalk. It would be what we call a raised intersection. So you'd actually ramp up, just like you ramp up on a speed hump, 3 or 4 inches, you would ramp up in all directions approaching an intersection, which is a nice feature. It is costly, I'll say that. So it's a cost thing to look at raising the intersections. You do have stop signs. So we recommend raised intersections oftentimes where you have people ignoring the stop sign. My mind kind of pinged a little bit over at the park when we have a single crossing with people flying through. That might not be a bad spot for a raised crosswalk type treatment, because it's also related to the pedestrian traffic. That's who's using that stop sign mostly. But again, raised intersections, like anything else, are cost really going into it. They are a nice feature. I think the bump outs slow people down pretty well here, and we have multi-way stops, so the vehicles kind of have to come to a stop. I don't know if we have major stop sign running issues at these 2 intersections, but it's something that could be looked at in the future. But I like the bump outs here rather than the raised intersections, because I think having the shorter ped crossings and then putting a little bit of that green space is a nice feature, a nice improvement for the intersections.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, particularly because we have 19 stormwater bump outs that we have to get in.
Yeah, we need to put these things in other places. Even at that park crossing, I was looking on my a map, and I know that crossing, but You can even put bump outs that sort of chicane traffic coming into a stop sign or an intersection that they're sort of forced to slow down. You just can't gas it all the way through because it's a bit of a chicane. So my mind started going on some improvements down there to help make people actually stop at the stop sign, other than enforcement. Because again, enforcement is tough to be out there all the time. That's why these physical features really help, because they don't require enforcement.
Agreed.
Second part, Cindy, the rubber speed humps. I've put them in the past. The biggest complaint I get is noise. They're oddly noisy when you go over them. It's like you hear every car go over, and people that live near them really do complain. It's not the same issue with the asphalt. It's just a little bit nicer. It's a little bit of a smoother ride over too. But the good thing about the mobile speed humps, or I call them temporary because people often put them in as a trial, the rubber ones, is they are removable. You can move them to different places and try them out if they don't work. Once you put the asphalt in, that's a permanent one. You know, you're going to have to mill it out if you ever don't want to have the speed hump in there. But in a tight residential area, I usually recommend the asphalt just for the noise issue.
Right. And Mike, I'm sorry. So people can park on that, and bikes can get over it with ease.
Oh yeah, but very easily. It's 12 feet long, and it's between 3 and 4 inches high. So it's really not that restrictive. It's meant to slow cars to like 15 miles an hour. It's not, to be honest, you can take them typically at 20 miles an hour. It's not a problem. It's not like a speed bump where you got to stop and then inch over the thing. So you can park right up to and on them. People park on them all the time, and bikes can drive over them very easily.
Great. It's more of a deterrent.
It's more of a deterrent. Yeah, it really is. It's something there that you can't go 35 miles an hour over it. You just can't, or you're going to catch air and bottom out when you hit the ground. But not that people haven't done that, believe me, but it's a deterrent. And again, these are the traffic on Iona is not out of towners trying to get somewhere. This is people that drive that road every day. So they're going to know the speed humps there. They're going to know the bump outs are there.
Correct. And then my last was, how can we then consider addressing speed on Meeting House and the issues on 300 as well?
What I'd like to do is whatever we put in as part of this 200 block, kind of like a pilot, we do our before and after to look at what it is. Some of that might help the 300 block. Some of it might not help the 200 block. So I kind of want to see what works and what doesn't work along Iona, and then we can take those lessons learned and expand it out to other blocks and other areas of the borough. So this is like a little bit of a pilot project borough-wide from a traffic calming standpoint. And not to go too far on a tangent, but from a borough-wide standpoint, I think we may want to consider developing a traffic calming policy. Right now, the borough doesn't have one. A lot of municipalities I work with, I've developed everything from a 2-page traffic calming policy to a booklet that's a traffic calming policy that really spells out the process of requesting traffic calming, studying when it's authorized, because I can tell you, once we start having some success, and if improvements go in on Iona, we're going to get a lot of calls from other folks, and it's good to have a very systematic way to address those requests. And it's good to have some backup for the decisions that are being made as far as traffic calming goes. Here, I'm following PennDOT's manual as far as these recommendations go, and I didn't raise it before when I was going through my report, but it's always good to get some concurrence from the folks that live on the block where you're putting traffic calming. PennDOT recommends surveys to go out and get a percentage of approval back before you put anything in. We might have enough phone calls and people in this meeting to get a concurrence on the 200 block of Iona. Just based on my notes, there are obviously a lot of residents that are concerned and want this. I don't think there'll be an issue getting approval from the residents to put in any of these improvements. That's just based on, hearing the complaints and the concerns raised at the meeting here this morning. So I think lessons learned, Cindy, on this is what we'll then use to address the 300 block and other places.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it. I mean, look, we've been battling this since 2005. So this is really great. And I guess the part B, which we can kind of put this on the back burner for now, is I'd be interested if there are any grants. I mean, again, stormwater bump outs, dual use, we have those funds, but, I'm wondering if we could look at any of those other multimodal grants when we think about more comprehensively, and I say that just to say, like, how do we tee up the data of the pilot evaluation to potentially be more aggressive on some comprehensive grant?
Yeah, and I think some of that comes with, like I said, if you put some effort in to do a pilot program and put together a traffic calming ordinance for the borough, right? So we have this manual. I think those efforts really go a long way in a grant application to say, okay, the borough is really doing work here to address these issues. They have a plan. They have a policy in place. They know what they're doing. They're organized. I think we give them money. You know, it's just kind of like all those things help us get grants in the future.
Yeah, that's really good. Rob, maybe we can really talk about this with John Walco to think, how do we come up with such a resolution if it's going to make us more competitive for funds? Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, we do have, under our previous manager, we did set up a protocol for, you know, a certain number of residents on the block to request a traffic study or traffic calming.
That's perfect. Yeah, that's great.
We have maybe 3 residents. It used to be just 1 resident, and we upped it to 3 so we could make it more manageable. But I like your idea, Mike. I think we could flesh that out so we have a whole process when a study would be triggered, and that would help us with grants. So, okay.
And it wouldn't be reinventing the wheel. You know, I could send over some samples for other municipalities, what they have, and it could be, hey, this you know, Aston's is very comprehensive. I did a very comprehensive one for Aston Township. We like this, you know, change some things, add some things. It's not that heavy of a lift since we've done it already. So.
Okay, that would be great if you can do that. Jean has a question.
So I really like the idea of pushing this out as a pilot program, because I think if we can collect as much data before, during, and after, as we implement those changes, that will help inform any other future traffic safety improvement programs in the town. And Cindy, you had my question about the grant funding, so I think, we should definitely look into that. I did have a specific question about the speed bump. Are those compatible with snowplow vehicles?
Yeah, so the grade of them, and you can see the little detail that's on the plan. That parabolic grade is really designed so that they're plowable. So these are meant to be plowable, although in all honesty, I always recommend a little marker on the side. So there'll be a speed hump sign. I think, Public Works is going to know where they're at, but they're designed to be plowable.
Okay, so are any other comments on this plan from police or fire? I mean, I think at this point, as a committee, we need to make a recommendation, obviously be decided by the council. But I would ask the committee members, are we comfortable moving this forward for council consideration? I mean, it's going to be a many-step process, from my understanding. If we were to go forward, there would need to be cost estimates developed, and there's a lot of work still to do. So it's not going to happen overnight. But I guess I'm asking Cindy and Jean if you are comfortable with the plan.
I'm comfortable with moving forward with it. I just want to make sure that we do check off all the boxes in terms of public outreach, make sure we get feedback during before and during the changes. So, but I do want to move it.
And this has more or less been covered, but when you talk about large trucks like fire trucks, I'm also concerned about more regular use by garbage trucks that have to get around it. It's the fire trucks are probably less frequent than garbage trucks, which are multiple times a week. And so I assumed by your answer with the larger trucks that they would measure garbage trucks as well.
They do. So what we try and look at is what's the largest vehicle that's going to be turning here. And luckily in the CAD programs that run our auto turn, you just select from any type of vehicle and put it on there. So we look at garbage trucks, we look at school buses, trash trucks, delivery vehicles. We're not going to have any 18-wheelers making this turn. I can't design it for that. But you do have box trucks. They're easier though. We usually don't. They're usually not our design control unless it's an area that no other trucks can go but box trucks. But yeah, we definitely will look at trash trucks and make sure that the largest vehicles that need to make the turn can make the turn.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. And Cindy, are you comfortable with this?
Oh yeah, very much so. I would like to talk to John Walker about the traffic calming ordinance, and would I guess like to ask Mike though for kind of a project timeline and cost. To package that and bring it to the full table, so we have all the information.
Okay, and Alan, is that doable for you? Good. So over the next month or so, you could bring it to council?
So this is gonna go to council. Council's gonna approve them to do the cost estimate, and then we'll go from there. Is that pretty much the
Yeah,
process?
that's what I'm thinking, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Okay. All right, so I think, I don't know that we need to vote, Cindy, but I think as a council, as a committee, we're recommending that the council consider this plan that was put together by our engineer, and the council can decide on the next step.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you so much, Mike. Okay, so we have only 15 minutes, so let's see what we can do. We have stop signs, Conway, Dudley, Grayling. This is 3.2. So my memory is that, Alan, was Mike able to look at that? I can't remember.
Mike, I think you did take a look at it, or you had some comments about the stop signs, right?
I had a report on Windsor and Conway and Dudley, where I recommended stop signs on Conway but not Dudley yet. What was the other street? Because I didn't look at that one yet.
Grayling and Windsor?
Yeah, I didn't look at Grayling and Windsor yet. That one didn't come across as a request to me, but I can look at that.
I think we had actually, Mike, sorry, Rob, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
We had, at the last meeting, I think we said, let's put it at Grayling while you assess it. Just because given most of our stop signs aren't warranted. That one more is not going to be that much of a problem. We might as well just put it up because it really is an issue because it's expected to have one given there's one at every block. Rob, am I remembering that correctly? That we all kind of nodded and said, yeah, just put it up there and then we'll have Mike add it to the list of stop signs to warrant?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, we had these, we had the concerns from the fire department, so that's what we're trying to balance about some of these stop signs. But Mike, can you speak to the other ones that you did study? Which was that Conway?
Yeah, so Conway, due to the proximity of the park, one of the warrants for a multi-way stop is if you're near a high pedestrian generator, and the park would be a high pedestrian generator into, to some degree, Barrel Hall, which is down the road there. So we felt that met warrants from a pedestrian safety standpoint, just because of the proximity to the park for stop signs. Dudley, not as much. There were no sight distance issues at Dudley. I recommended that it could be seen as a high pedestrian generator if we do have a lot of pedestrians crossing there. This was a little while back when the weather wasn't as nice, so I wanted to revisit that now that the weather is getting nice and actually do some observation of pedestrians crossing to see if it meets any sort of pedestrian warrants. So that's where I was with those two. Recommended at Conway, but not at Dudley yet.
Okay.
And just to kind of point out, I think if the fire company's concern is too many stop signs, that is a concern. I think some of the comments that were raised earlier about people just running stop signs, some of that comes from stop sign fatigue. If they're kind of everywhere, if you're stopping at too many stop signs and you're stopping at stop signs where there doesn't seem to be a need for one, where there's no pedestrians crossing, there's really no traffic coming in from the other side, people get stop sign fatigue and they start to ignore them and they lose their regulatory effect when you have too many of them. That's why we really want to make sure we have warrants for any of the stop signs that we put in. I know there are a lot of unwarranted stop signs in every community. That's just how it goes. But I do recommend that you have, something from an engineer on file that says it's warranted. Because from a liability standpoint, you want to make sure you're putting in warranted traffic controls. And B, if you have too many stop signs, if you have them in locations where there's no real need to be there, the public starts to lose faith in them and they just start to ignore them, which I think we're seeing a little bit.
Okay, so we have our engineer recommending a stop sign in Conway. So is the committee comfortable with that? We've heard the fire concerns. It's something we could try, and our fire chief can tell us if it presents a hardship, and we will revisit it. I mean, it's a hard balance that we're trying to strike between the pedestrian question.
I would just say once it's up, it's never going to come down. So
really,
I don't see borough council for removing the stop sign. I've never seen it.
Oh, okay.
So to say that we could try it, and if it doesn't work, I don't really see that as a viable option.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. Once a stop sign's in, you can remove a stop sign, but it's always tough because, you take out a stop sign, a crash for any reason at all, it's just gonna be a liability nightmare, because it used to be in there. So I agree with that sentiment.
Okay. All right, well, Cindy, do you have a thought on this? Conway stop sign?
Yeah, I think given the amount of volume and how, again, not only the data and the engineers recommend, but quite honestly, how often I just kind of hold my breath and hope for the best when I inch out there, and the proximity to the park, I am comfortable moving forward with the stop sign.
I just also want to emphasize that whole area around the park, it really needs to be pedestrian friendly. This is high pedestrian counts. I have read, however, that the stop signs aren't always effective so I just want to ask you, Mike, if you think that's the best solution for that strip of Windsor Avenue, or if there's other solutions that we should consider.
Yeah, I think there are other solutions to be considered. I don't know how you get past the stop sign unless you're getting into a raised intersection, but even with a raised intersection, we'd probably put a stop sign in to help the pedestrians cross anyway. So I think I'd say in addition to the stop sign, just based on some of the complaints we heard earlier, that area of Windsor sort of near the park should be looked at, kind of holistically from a pedestrian accommodation and traffic calming standpoint. But for the very specific intersection, the Peds crossing there, it does meet, in my opinion, a warrant for a stop sign.
Rob, if I can ask then, I do think once we get through this Iona and we have that traffic calming, the part two of my ask to Mike would be is, okay, then where else in the borough can we strategically use those stormwater bump outs?
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that Windsor Avenue corridor, given the park, would be potentially the second highest priority once we have a proof of concept.
I do want to get it right. I don't want to kind of rush the decision with the stop signs without making sure that we have the best solution in place. And we have to consider complete streets, meaning addressing like all of the needs that we have there, for the pedestrians, for the stormwater management, and for cyclist traffic. So I think it's worth thinking through that a little bit more, and especially if you're saying there might be some other solutions that we can do to make it more effective and safer for pedestrians there.
But Mike, I heard you saying a stop sign is the first step, that even with the raised pedestrian crosswalk, you would still recommend a stop sign there?
I am recommending a stop sign there, and then I'm also recommending additional improvements, from a traffic calming and pedestrian. Well, I'm not recommending specific improvements. I'm recommending studying it to look at additional improvements there, pedestrian.
Right. Okay, but this is a good first step.
Yeah, I think it's warranted, and I've documented that it's warranted. So you kind of have that, from an engineer. You have an intersection that's warranted for a stop sign. It doesn't mean it absolutely has to go in, but for what it's worth, if anyone has an issue, there's documentation that there is a warrant met for a stop sign. So.
Okay, so is the committee comfortable recommending stop sign at Conway and Windsor?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. All right. Cindy, is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Any objections? Chief?
Just one recommendation. I don't know if we can do a speed study on Windsor before the installation. This way, as we're putting up one stop sign, we can do an analysis afterward to see if we have that mid-block speed increase that traditionally comes with a stop sign, and use that to evaluate future decisions on Windsor.
Okay, great. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Okay, so we'll recommend that we go ahead. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to be in this position, you can't satisfy everybody. Fran?
If this is gonna go ahead, the only thing the borough would look at is maybe eliminating the parking in front of the library. Because if you're gonna start to have lines waiting on Windsor and Conway, and there's cars parked in front of the library, when we have to make a left-hand turn in the fire apparatus, getting through is gonna be very close to being impossible. And I would just also add, when you're starting to plan these bump outs, that everyone remember that if there's a serious fire, all the apparatus doesn't come from one direction. So don't say, well, Norwood will take a left off Windsor on the Dudley, so that's the only thing we have to worry about. You're gonna have apparatus that's probably coming down and taking a right off Windsor onto Dudley. So the bump outs need to be planned with the idea that emergency equipment needs to be able to access these streets wherever and from whatever direction. Okay, we get calls when we're on our way back from those. So we don't go the same way.
You're not always coming from Conway, yeah.
So all points of entry and egress have to be considered.
Okay, thank you, Fran. So, all right, now, we're running out of time. So we have Price, Conway, this is 3.3. I don't know if we have any detail on this one, Alan, or?
Price and Conway?
Yeah, do we have anything from Mike on that, or?
Yeah, that one, I recommended an always stop there a while back.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we're just waiting for it to be installed. I believe the last update it was ordered, right, Jeff?
We have everything. I was just never told to put them in yet.
Fabulous. So we can say it today, right?
Okay.
So we have Conway and Windsor and Price and Conway, those two.
Right. Okay. Right.
I would ask, when we put in a new stop sign, if there's like a flashing red, because people are used to driving up and down the street and they're used to not stopping, it'd be new. If there's any way to draw attention to the new stop sign for drivers, like a flashing, one of those flashing red signs, lights, so that people are aware there's a change.
That is recommended. That's a great point. And put its little battery operated flashing red light you put on top of them. It doesn't last that long with the battery, but you don't need it to. Just for a few weeks, even a month or so, just so people see it and they know there's a new stop sign there. It's always a good idea.
If we could post those on social media as well.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Okay, and before we leave the traffic part of the agenda, we do have, as I mentioned, this procedure where we ask for 3 residents of a block. In the case of Iona, we had a petition, I think, of over 20 folks. So there was a clear call from the community to pay attention to what was happening in Iona. So, to our neighbors on other blocks, if you have concerns, please organize your neighbors. Send us 3 complaints so that we can begin our process. Okay. And I think what we would do is we're going to work with Mike and Alan to see if we can develop this traffic calming procedure, so how we can handle these complaints going forward.
And also the complaints are through the line.
Yeah. So the way to do it is on the Narberth, for our website. It's pretty easy. You can just file your complaint through MyGov. And then Alan, the manager, is able to see all of the different complaints and then funnel to the committee. But this way we're not looking at just every single issue that might come up. We're trying to triage, basically, right? And put our attention on the most pressing concerns. And I'm also aware of our border zones. This was raised by Dave Berto. So where we border with Lower Merion is especially challenging, and I think we're going to need Mike to help us with that as well. So I'm thinking of East Benwood and Chestnut.
And also thank you to you all for being engaged and coming forward with your feedback. It's really important, and I think we need to hear from the community more about these issues.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for.
Yeah, thank you all. So
It's a question.
we actually, if you don't mind, if you could email the question, just because we're almost out of time, or you're welcome to stay after if you like. Okay, so we have a lot more on the agenda, and we're almost out of time. Alan, is there anything pressing from what's left that we would need to get to?
I was hoping to talk about the plastics ordinance.
Yeah, Chief, is there anything pressing that you need from us at this meeting?
No, just one resident question about the body camera trials going on. We're trying I think I discussed it, was a cell phone based one. We have a more traditional model that we're going to test out after this trial's ended, and then we're getting forward some support with the information.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, if we could take, Cindy, could you stay with us for a minute and we could discuss the plastics?
Yeah. I just have one comment before we go, a request with Jeff and John in the room. If I can make that real quick. There seems to be a lot of road closures with the PICO work and confusion about traffic, and I'm wondering if while we have John and Jeff and Alan in the room, if we could make a request for maybe some advisory information to go out via the flash and social media to best help direct folks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, unfortunately yesterday, it was kind of like the perfect storm where it's like, you had Wynwood closed because they were restoring the road, they were doing the restoration work. Then you also had a lot of tree work happening around the town, so that caused a lot of issues yesterday. And I made a suggestion to our office manager that when we know of road closures, we should probably put this on Google and Waze so people will know when they're driving that it'll detour them around those areas. So that's something we're going to do going forward. We did post on the website about them doing the restoration work on Wynwood, but people don't always check, the website or the flash. Like I feel like trying, doing it on Google and like Waze is probably the best way to do it, and also trying to better coordinate road closures so we don't have, multiple roads closed down at like the same time.
Also, this is something that we've talked about the Everbridge platform. When that gets implemented, people will be able to get alerts either on their phone, by text message, or email, whatever medium you choose, about those kind of alerts that are really important.
All right, Rob, yes, I could stay for plastics. I didn't mean to add.
Yeah, okay, so just briefly, our solicitor took a look at a sample. He's been working on a plastics ordinance for another township. And he compared that to the memo we received from the EAC, which Alan has up on the screen. And they're very similar. So he has 2 questions for our committee, and then he could bring a draft ordinance for our consideration. Okay, so the 2 questions are, one is about plastic utensils. The EAC recommends that utensils be offered at a restaurant on an as-needed basis. And the solicitor says, does the committee desire to have plastic utensils on a per requested basis? So do we agree with that, in other words? So that's the first question. Yeah, Jean?
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think there's certain times when either whether you have a disability or I don't know, like there will be a need for that. So as long as it's not automatically handed out.
Right. That's the intent. That it no longer would be a default.
I think one of the problems with that, Rob, is that it is the default. I mean, you don't regulate it. There's so many other options of compostable and wooden utensils. I think it's easier just to ban it. I mean, we found the problem with even the bag, regulating the bags. It was just it's really difficult. I mean, theoretically, we can say don't offer it, but that is
Right.
the routine and the habit. I'm comfortable saying we just ban it, given the fact that there are so many alternatives.
Okay. All right, so that's one question. And then the other is, about the exemptions. The EAC recommended 2 exemptions, but there's a much longer list of exemptions that's pretty standard in these ordinances. And my sense is that we would go with the larger list of exemptions. And that was what we did last time, if you remember. So I was thinking the exemptions would pretty much stay consistent. Are you comfortable with that? Okay. Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll just communicate that, or Alan, if you don't mind communicating back to John Walker.
It's an EAC, or to John.
Yeah, and then that he's ready to kind of bring a draft ordinance to the committee.
Okay.
I think it would be pretty easy.
Yeah, we already have the sample ordinances in the packet, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I had a question, I think I raised it with you outside the meeting. As a retail owner, if we collect paper bags from people, say, drop off your used paper bags for reuse, you wouldn't have to charge for reuse of a already used paper bag, so we could just keep reusing that usable bag.
Yeah, that's consistent with what the Girl Scouts did when we originally instituted the plastic ban. We had, bags that were freely available.
Right.
For customers to use. So that's always an option.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's as far as we can go on our agenda. We did not get to the solid waste or to the mobile food, so we'll try. Maybe I can work with Alan and try to get something ready for us to consider by our next meeting.
I'm just gonna add that, John Walker did do the ordinance, so we do have it.
Okay.
Just a matter of reviewing it.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's in the packet.
Okay.
For mobile food?
Yeah, for the solid waste.
Oh, for solid waste, okay.
Yeah.
Just real quick, so what do we decide about the apartments and the multi-unit housing?
I don't think we made a decision.
Okay. So that's still under consideration?
Yeah, I think what we should do is, as a committee, we should review this draft ordinance from John on solid waste.
I think we should make that the focus of our June meeting.
Yeah, so maybe we should do that first.
Yeah.
And by that point, we may also have the plastics ordinance. And I'll try to work with Alan on the mobile food. Okay.
I know that's also a pressing matter, so.
Yeah.
It's hard to fit everything in and out.
It is. There's a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. So I think we can adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Okay. So we'll finish for today, and we'll reconvene next month.
Great. Thanks all.
Thank you.